What if the nightmares from your childhood never really went away? And what if something evil, was hunting kids like you? This is Dr. Sleep, the chilling sequel to The Shining, where grown-up Danny Torrance is forced to face the ghosts of his past and protect a girl with incredible powers. Now let's dive into the full story, from the return of the Overlook's horrors to a final showdown that will decide who survives, and who sleeps forever. Young Violet Hanson is on a camping trip with her family when she wanders into the forest one afternoon. There, she encounters a mysterious woman by the lake who introduces herself as Rose the Hat. Rose captivates Violet with her magic tricks, but the girl soon notices shadowy figures watching them from a distance. Rose tells Violet she possesses a little bit of magic, just before she and the others close in on her. Elsewhere, a young Danny Torrance continues to struggle with the trauma he endured at the Overlook Hotel. His mother, Wendy, is concerned because he hasn't spoken since they left.
You haven't talked since we left.
And he remains haunted by terrifying visions, like the Grady twins and the woman from room 237. Through his shine, Danny sees the spirit of Dick Halloran, who teaches him how to trap these malevolent spirits using mental lockboxes. Later, Wendy finds Danny sitting alone on a bench, unaware he's been talking to a ghost. That night, as Danny and Wendy watch TV together, Danny excuses himself to go to the bathroom, where the bathtub lady awaits him. Using what he's learned, he traps her in a box within his mind, and afterward, begins speaking to his mother again. 2011. Now an adult, Dan lives in New Jersey and battles alcoholism. One night, after a bar fight, he wakes up next to a woman he met at the bar, and is disturbed to find her young child nearby. In Long Island, a teenage girl named Andy meets an older man she connected with online. Watching from afar are Rose and her partner Crow Daddy. Andy uses her power to control minds,
Sleep.
leaving a snake-like cut on the man's cheek. Impressed, Rose approaches her after the encounter and brings her into their group, the True Knot, a cult that feeds on people with the shine. Rose dubs her, Snakebite Andy, and promises a life of youth and power. Anniston, New Hampshire. 5-year-old Abra Stone is celebrating her birthday. To her parents' amazement, she makes several spoons float to the ceiling, cheerfully exclaiming, "Abracadabra," before dropping them onto the table. Meanwhile, Dan arrives in Fraser, New Hampshire, looking for a fresh start. He befriends Billy Freeman, who helps him find a place to stay and encourages him to stay on the right path. That night, Rose takes Andy to a beachside ritual led by Grandpa Flick, the eldest True Knot member. Rose opens a canister containing Violet's shine, a mist-like essence harvested from her. Andy absorbs the shine, screaming as it fuses with her while the rest of the cult feeds on the remains. Dan begins having terrifying dreams, including one where a ghost lies next to him in bed. Seeking help, he turns to Billy, who takes him to an AA meeting. Afterward, Dan meets Drive, John Dalton, Bruce Greenwood, and reveals a personal detail about him that no stranger should know, impressing Dalton enough to offer him a job at the local hospice.
Dying people bother you?
One night, Dan sees the hospice's cat, Azzy, enter a dying patient's room, a known sign of impending death. The man is afraid until Dan reassures him telepathically that death is merely like falling asleep.
Oh, and I don't want...
Nothing to be scared of. Just going to sleep. Finally. True. Restful. Sleep.
Comforted, the man peacefully passes, and nicknames Dan, Dr. Sleep. That night, Dan returns home to find, "Hello," written on his wall with a smiley face in the "oh." He responds by writing, "Hi." 8 years later, now 8 years sober, Dan continues to attend AA meetings and reflects on his father's struggles with addiction. He remains committed to his work at the hospice, helping patients find peace before death. Dan also maintains a psychic connection with Abra. Meanwhile, the True Knot is starving, surviving on scraps of shine from weaker children. They target a young baseball prodigy, Bradley Trevor, whose strong shine gives him an edge in the game. The cult kidnaps him, and in a secluded spot, they torture and murder him, feeding on his pain. At that moment, Abra senses the horror from her home and cries out to her parents, telling them the boy has been killed. Rose senses Abra's presence too, calling her a looker. Later, Dan discovers the word redrum scrawled on his wall. When he asks Abra who did it, she responds with baseball boy. Meanwhile, the True Knot buries Bradley's body in a shallow grave. Abra begins investigating the disappearance of Bradley Trevor. At school, she can hear her classmates' thoughts.
My hair? She changed my hair. What is she staring at? Freak.
And once she's back in her room, she experiences vivid visions of the True Knot and their location. Looking out her window, she briefly levitates as her mind connects with Rose, who is browsing inside a supermarket. Rose becomes aware of Abra's presence and tries to enter her mind, but Abra pushes her out with such force that it physically throws Rose across the floor.
Get out of my head! Get out!
Shocked and unsettled, Rose realizes just how powerful Abra is. She later tells Crow that Abra's shine may be too strong for them to handle, and that they may need to eliminate her. Dan and Abra eventually meet in person and share their experiences with the shine. Dan explains that he used to call his ability Tony, thinking it was just an imaginary friend. Abra admits she thought Dan was hers. When she tells him about the True Knot, Dan warns her to be cautious and avoid drawing attention by using her powers. Later that night at the hospice, Dan follows Azzy the cat into a patient's room and encounters the spirit of Dick Halloran for the first time since childhood. Dick warns Dan about the True Knot and urges him to protect Abra.
They eat screams and drink pain.
He also tells Dan this will be their final conversation. Meanwhile, Rose enters a deep meditative state and manages to infiltrate Abra's mind while she sleeps. Inside, she finds a mental space resembling a filing cabinet room. As Rose searches for information, Abra springs a trap, slamming her hand inside a drawer. Rose screams as her skin tears when she yanks it free. Back in her physical body, she sees the injury has followed her. Around this time, Crow reveals that Grandpa Flick is cycling. Too weak to go on, Flick convulses and deteriorates into dust, releasing his remaining steam, which the cult absorbs. Abra reaches out to Dan again, asking for help in locating Bradley's body. She explains she can pinpoint the cult's location by touching the boy's glove. With Billy's assistance, Dan follows Abra's guidance to the burial site. He and Billy dig up the remains, visibly shaken by the gruesome discovery. They bring the glove to Abra's home, but her father, Dave, has grown suspicious of Uncle Dan, and confronts him. After revealing the truth and demonstrating their abilities, Abra convinces Dave of the danger, and they prepare to track down the True Knot. Dan and Billy venture into the woods to set a trap. Abra projects herself from her kitchen while Dan and Billy lie in wait. When the cult members arrive, they open fire. Rose feels each member's death through their psychic link. Billy fatally shoots Andy, but not before she uses her final breath to compel Billy to turn the gun on himself.
Kill yourself.
Billy!
At the same time, Crow murders Dave and kidnaps Abra. Dan returns home and psychically connects with Abra, temporarily possessing her body. Working together, they force Crow to crash his vehicle into a tree, launching him through the windshield and killing him on impact. Dan rescues Abra, and together they head toward the now abandoned Overlook Hotel to make their final stand. Inside the decrepit building, Dan revisits the trauma of his past. He enters room 237, where the axe marks from Jack's rampage still scar the door. In the bar, he encounters Lloyd, a bartender who looks exactly like his father, Jack. Though Lloyd insists he's just a bartender, their conversation reveals Jack's spirit beneath the surface. Dan speaks of his mother Wendy's death and the signs he saw before it happened. Lloyd eventually drops the act and takes a drink meant for Dan.
And this is the medicine. Are you gonna take your medicine?
Rose arrives at the hotel soon after. Dan and Abra attempt to trap her in the Overlook's hedge maze.
Go.
Abra injures Rose, but Rose fights back and overpowers them. She invades Dan's mind, exploring the depths of his trauma and feeding off his shine. When Rose discovers the mental boxes Dan uses to contain the hotel's spirits, she mistakenly believes they hold more power.
What's in those? Something special, huh?
They're not special. They're starving.
Instead, Dan opens them, unleashing the Overlook's ghosts. The Grady twins, the bathtub lady, and other spectral horrors descend on Rose and consume her essence, destroying her. But the spirits are not satisfied. They turn on Dan and possess him. As he hunts for Abra, she reaches out to him psychically and discovers he's in the boiler room. Aware of what must be done, Dan tells Abra to run while he overloads the boiler.
Right? Run! Run!
He sacrifices himself, letting the spirits perish with him as the Overlook goes up in flames. Abra watches the explosion from outside. Sometime later, Abra continues to speak with Dan's spirit. When her mother asks about it, Abra at first denies it, then admits she talks to both Dan and her father. Lucy seems accepting of her daughter's abilities. Before they settle in to watch TV, Abra excuses herself and heads to the bathroom, where the bathtub lady waits. But this time, Abra is ready.